All right. This is officially our first podcast.
Nice. What are you calling it?
I don't have a name yet. I think that's, I don't know if this will become a thing, but I've been wanting to interview now all, my buddies in the filmmaking space.
Yeah.
And of course, I thought of you and I was like,
Honored.
I gotta hit up Chris.
Yeah.
So anybody watching this, Chris is an amazing cinematographer. Should we name agencies? Or we just say agency to make it?
I'm fine to talk
You're
about
cool?
agencies.
Okay, so Chris works at Power Digital. He's one of the directors of video, basically,
yeah,
right?
just a director.
Yeah, so he has a lot of experience on set. I met him through doing street photography, but yeah, he's an amazing cinematographer and creative, and I think he's very knowledgeable and a really good person to show how to get to, the creative field.
I think we met because also when I moved out here, you had followed one of my best friends, Evan, ramped. And then, just like anything in the industry, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, dude, Evan was a big inspiration for me when I started because he was doing a lot of street photography and he was one of the few people that I saw working in the industry and sharing that side. He actually made a video where he talked about doing video and how he lost a client. And to me, that was like, damn, I got to learn video. That was like my switch. I remember that clear as day. And I remember seeing you in the videos and then you just followed me on like Twitter or something.
Yeah, it was something like that. I'm trying to even remember. Even though it was only like 3-ish years ago, that feels like so long ago.
Dude, for real. It was longer, dude, wasn't it?
Maybe? Actually, don't even remember.
Because I've been trying to freelance for like 5 years. I think it was like 5 years ago, dude.
So you and I met top of 2020 when I moved out here from Atlanta. And then the lockdowns hit, and obviously we couldn't like post up as much.
How long were you at Outfront?
So I had such a funny route to getting to Outfront. So actually I just posted this on my LinkedIn, but the story, I was just meeting up with Evan to do some content with him for his YouTube channel. And we were up at this rooftop in Atlanta at a buddy's place where he gave me the code. He wasn't there at the time, but I was like, hey dude, we're going to go use your roof. And, this was 2017. So I was a couple months out of college. And I'd already had a photography business and I was doing okay, but I was also still working a restaurant job at the time and really just like trying to go full-time freelance. And I was feeling frustrated and discouraged because I wasn't making enough money to be able to support myself. And I remember that day in particular, I was kind of in my head about it and kind of debating, do I just give up that and like just focus on something else? And so I remember, I took this photo. If you're editing this and you clip it together, basically after so many tries of trying to get this pan shot where I was dragging my shutter to where if I follow a subject, the subject will be in focus, but the entire background will be blurred and in motion. It's a technique that people do in post-production, sometimes for automotive photography, but sometimes it just looks nice to have in camera. And so I remember it was my final shot. We were losing light and I was kind of in the like, if I don't get this, it wasn't meant to be, I give up. And also maybe I give up photography too. And I remember seeing the back of my screen and I knew that photo was going to do something for me. I didn't quite know what. But ultimately it actually led me to meet with Outfront Media to be one of their like photographers. And I remember this was end of 2017. And so I was, shooting a lot of mostly photo for them. And then I eventually let them know I did video. And so I was making a similar pivot years ago where I started off just in photography, but I knew I had to like do video because it was going to bring in money. Mm-hmm. It was also like the degree I got. So like maybe I need to actually like use my degree. But I eventually just kind of became their preferred photographer, videographer for the Southeast. And then it was towards the end of 2019. I had just gotten back from Sony's condo trip with Evan, and like being out west made me realize this is where I want to be with my life. I don't know what I'm going to do for a career, but I know I want to be west, and particularly in San Diego. So I visited San Diego years ago when I was still in college and kind of fell in love with it and knew I kind of wanted to be here, but I didn't know how to get here. Just because all my family, my entire life is on the East Coast, and none of my family lives out here, so it's not like I have a safety net or anything like that.
Dude, that's tough, man, that you did that.
Yeah.
That's gnarly, dude.
And so towards the end of 2019, I remember talking with Eddie Hurdy, who's the VP and National Creative Director for Outfront. I saw they were posting an art director job. And I remember talking with him at an event I was shooting for them, saying, hey, I'm thinking of moving to San Diego. I see this job's available. I'm not the world's best graphic designer, but I can, I'm a visual person at heart. Do you think this is a job that I could do? Shoot straight with me. If you don't, that's okay, is what it is. And so, I don't hear anything for about 2 months. And then they had taken the job listing down. And I was like, I guess I'm not going to get this job. I'm not going to be able to move out west or all this stuff. And then they were like, hey, so actually the candidate that we had, they changed their mind. They're not going to be working with us. So you have a week to send us a test project. And so I remember, and looking back, the creative was atrocious. You get 1% better every day if you're a creative, that you're taking your craft seriously. So I can say that it was something that now I wouldn't be proud of, but back then I was really excited on how it turned out.
I think that's kind of how like our work tends to be, right? I mean, I look back and there's a very few like shots that I'm still like, I like this.
Yeah. I mean, and the funniest thing is, if you're an everyday person who's not doing what we're doing, people aren't paying attention.
Yeah, we look at the details, but I convinced myself that those are the details that make the photo, right?
Right.
The things that we catch.
And they are.
I feel like subliminally, or whatever would be the right word, it's like they catch it when they can tell it's a great photo.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what it is, but that's what separates us.
Yeah.
Knowing what it is. I'd love to hear though, how did you like start from the beginning? Like,
yeah.
I remember you mentioned you like assisted for somebody, right?
So like beginning of my career, or like how I got into photography?
Beginning of your career.
Yeah. So I kind of started doing freelance jobs here and there while I was at school at Georgia State. This was like 2013 through 2016. And then summer of 2016.
Were you shooting like portraits or what?
Portraits, events, all that kind of stuff. And a guy in Atlanta that I'd known through the photo industry basically was like, hey, I'm not going to be assisting for this commercial photographer anymore. Would you want to take over? Now, granted, the older I've gotten, so I would have been 23 at the time. I kind of went into it with a little bit of an ego, like any young hotshot does. And like, hell yeah, like I'm going to work with somebody who does big time commercial work. I did a lot of stuff and I did learn a lot. And ultimately, he really did push me to be better, to grow in my craft, not just take boring Instagram friendly photos, be an artist. And I think to the day, he has shared some wisdom that still, sits with me, that I act on, that whenever, I teach anyone anything, it's still rules that I will follow or break if I so choose. And I remember some of the 3 fundamentals he really taught me just about event photography, commercial photography, so many different things, was, fill the frame, control your background, wait for moments. And I think those 3 fundamentals ultimately set me up to then grow my own business because of the quality of work I was putting out at the time. Obviously now I don't think it was that great, but ultimately I worked under him as an assistant for about a year. And funny enough, around that same time that I took that photo that I was talking about a second ago, he was basically, him and I agreed that like, hey, don't think this assistant role is for you anymore. We're going to move you on. And ultimately I met with Outfront, was able to go full-time freelance just on working with them. Now, granted, I was living a very bachelor life. I didn't have a wife, didn't have kids. So I didn't have like big expenses or anything of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, I think, and I joke with my wife about this, where I'm like, dude, I think if I would have chosen to be a plumber, I'd be a millionaire right now, of how much time I've invested into this craft.
Oh, yeah.
Like how much free work we have to put out, in the beginning, how many hours, like, there's so much to the learning curve of this just to make it a career, which I love it. I love every second of it. There's some stressful times, of course. but it's fucking amazing, you know?
Yeah. It, ultimately, I'm right there with you. I could have been doing so many different things, but I'm happy that I chose this route because ultimately I actually started off in music. So I grew up playing guitar, and I remember I wanted to make a career out of it, but when I realized that musicians make even less usually than photographers, videographers, and the sheer amount of getting taken advantage of you do in that industry, I kind of realized that wasn't for me, but I didn't know what to do because I'd always been a creative person my entire life. And I remember when I was younger, my dad would let me play with the cameras he had and take photos, and I was interested in it, but I never applied myself. And then I want to say around senior year of high school, one of my best friends he was really tantamount early in my career to getting to where I am. So his name's Alex. He runs a wedding videography business called Love and Motion Films out in Atlanta. Great person. If you need a wedding videographer, hire him in Atlanta. But I remember I would kind of help him take photos during pep rallies so I could sit in class less. I would kind of do that thing, and, him and I wound up going to Georgia State together. And so he's my closest friend earlier on in college. And I remember we would just go out, take photos. He'd teach me how to edit photos. And, I've had all these experiences that I feel like have just created like a domino effect that created a trajectory for where I'm at now. And, I'm sitting here around a decade total in the industry, and, I'm not where I want to be, but ultimately I was having a conversation with my current boss, and this idea that a lot of us have around making it is really just a myth. There is no making it. There's always a new achievement to have. There's always the next gig to have, the new thing to have. And, I remember when I was working under the photographer that we did a lot of commercial stuff in Atlanta, I remember I was talking with him, just like, dude, I just want to make it. Like, I want to be able to do these things. And I remember him laughing at me. At first I was like, dude, what the heck? But, he told me, he's like, if you think you've hit your stride now, you're kidding yourself. He was 40 something at the time and was saying, I'm 40 and I just feel like I'm finally hitting it. And this guy had shot with ESPN. He's done magazine covers on New York Times. He worked under Joe McNally, who's a legend in the commercial photo industry and photojournalism world. So, for all the experiences he had, for him to say that made me realize, I need to let my ego go a little bit and really just be like dedicated to the journey and understand that my journey is going to be fundamentally different than somebody else's. And it's something I consistently have to remind myself. Like, nobody's going to have the same path as you.
Do you hear that music?
Oh, yeah. Just the sounds of San Diego.
Like, what in the world is going on outside? Yeah, that whole the trajectory and I think it's very eye-opening the minute you like get to a production or like even film and stuff. Because I did one-man band for the longest time, and I had some work with like my first agency, which was Launchboom, where it's like,
yeah,
you get that first agency gig and you get the check and you're just like, oh my god, I used to make this in a month, right? Like,
right.
It's just gnarly. It's such a big difference. But you feel like you're good, and then you start to compare yourself to people that are doing it, and you're just like, god damn, I'm not that good. Or then, like, for me, I went from one-man band to then getting on a production set, right? And I felt confident with what I knew, but I realized I didn't even know how to use a C-stand properly. Like, I thought I knew how to use it, and I got there and I'm like, well, I know there's more things you can do with a C-stand. I didn't know there was all these things. And it really, I think it just comes down to being humble at all times, no matter who you're working with, because every time I go on set with a new, DP, whatever, producer, director, whomever is there, new production, I always learn something new. No matter who it is, they might have a different trick, a different way of doing things, and there's always things to learn. So the last thing you want is a freaking ego.
Yeah. And, there's a book that any creative out there I would recommend. I read it this year for the first time and I plan on rereading it. Is Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. it's tantamount because I don't even know how to describe it, but it really reframed so much for me around the industry is, ego will prevent you from making connections with other people as well as preventing you from learning. This industry is not as big as we think it is. Most people know most people. And so the impact you have on people isn't going to go unnoticed.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild, man. I work with now various people, in this industry, and some people that just like, I DP, I cam up, I gaff, but if I come in as a gaffer, I'm not saying anything that a DP says, right? Maybe I'll give a suggestion here and there, but it's not my call at the end of the day. And I've worked with some DPs that gaff, and then it's like they kind of want to take over, and it's like, dude, chill.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to communication, and if you're on a set with somebody, they're your teammate, you're there to achieve the same vision that a director, creative director, or client has set, and ultimately you own your role and you collaborate with other people. I mean, there is no BTS footage to be able to talk about it, but when you and I were working on that planned delivery commercial, it was very much like hey, I'm going to tell you what I want and what I'm looking for. It's up to you to make the decisions on how best to get there.
Right.
Because something that one of my close friends, I met him at Georgia State, and we kind of went to college around the same time. He realized he was wasting his time getting a degree when he could just jump into the film industry. So he's got a couple years ahead of me, and he lived in LA for a long time. He's back in Atlanta now, but lived in LA and was doing a lot of editing, assistant directing, a bunch of other stuff. But I remember him telling me, on set, you can only do one thing good. That's all. The more hats you wear, the thing that you're there to do is going to suffer.
Yeah, that is 100% true, because like I've had it where there's no sound guy and we're running sound and then we forgot to hit record. But it's too many roles, depending on the production size and everything.
Yeah. Well, even as I've started to step into larger sets and bigger budgets, each line, crew, item, they're an expert in their own craft. And so it's really empowering them and trusting them. They're there for a reason. They know their stuff. And if you're a director, your job is to facilitate creative vision alongside the client and creative director and whoever else is a stakeholder in that. And then ultimately, you're communicating that with the rest of the team. And, if you're a gaffer, it's, hey, DP wants this style of lighting. Maybe you guys have talked about it in pre-production. Maybe there's a new change. Cool. You guys are teammates to figure this out together.
Yeah, dude, that's like, but I think it just throws me off, like when I get to work with like new people or people that like hit me up. Like I've had people hit me up that are like, dude, I'm a DP. I'm like, great. What's your day rate? I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? And I'm like, well, where's your work? And then, he's like, well, I don't really have, that much work, and I don't have this and that. And in my head, I'm like, dude, you know how hard it's been for me to call myself a DP? Like, and it's still to this day, it's like, I feel confident with what I do, but I go into the set a little nervous because you don't know what's going to encounter, how you're going to fix it. There's always problems. But people that haven't hit that realization of all the stuff you have to go through, like to really see how much work really comes into it, how much, experience really trumps, whatever you think you saw on YouTube sometimes, right? But then to this, where when the people hit me up and they're like, hey, I want to just jump on set, don't even worry about paying me. I just want to learn. You can have me PA, grip, I'll do whatever it takes. Those are the first people that I'm going to hit up rather than the other people that are trying to come in and DP. I mean, and plus, I don't really hire DPs because I'm not getting those budgets just yet. But
yeah. Well, even when I'm directing things at the agency I'm at now, if I'm not DPing it and one of my teammates isn't, we're particular about who we're bringing in.
Yeah.
Because just bringing in somebody off the street who says they are is different than when you've worked with somebody. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Reputation is everything, and how you impact others is everything. So if I know somebody's maybe good at creative but not good to be around on set, I'm not going to be able to like justify in my head hiring them.
Yeah, it just makes the whole day worse, and you're stuck with them for at least 10 hours.
Right. And ultimately too, I've felt the same struggles as you in terms of what even to call myself.
Yeah.
But if there's one thing I've learned from people ahead of me, there is a level of owning your own creative career where you are what you say you are. Now, granted, a lot of people, like you've said, have YouTube University as a friend, but I've never applied that knowledge. And, something that even outside of working on sets for free, because I'm a proponent of that to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I think everyone is worth something, and everyone is worth more than nothing, if that makes sense. Like, I want to pay people, and obviously if they make it abundantly clear they're okay with it, it's like you said, you did it for me this time, I owe you a favor.
Yeah.
We'll cash in eventually.
Like the way I see it when it comes to like the working for free, like even someone hits me up and like, hey dude, we don't got budget or something like that. It has to be a project where it lines up with where I want to be. Because the only reason I would work for free is because, I'm shooting a documentary about something that I'm so fascinated, or we're shooting a commercial and there's so much pre-production that already went in. It's a spec ad, no one's making money, or there's some reason for it that calls for, okay, this makes sense for my portfolio. Like I'm getting something out of it, right? Or like, how we talked about doing spec ads and we'll help each other out here and there, which that's mutual benefit, right? We're trying to grow a portfolio of what we love and stuff. I see it like someone wants to come in and help me. I haven't really done it, to be honest, but I do get these messages, and the thing is, I need people to just keep messaging me. and that's
same.
the thing. Like, I know you might think you're annoying, but trust me, if you bother me more times, and watch, I get a bunch of flood of IGs, but the point is, when I get the day that I need someone, I forget who messaged me. And I DM, no joke, I end up with like 10 to 15 conversations a day, because I'll like someone's post, story, whatever, on IG, or I ask people for when I can't make a gig, I always sub it out to whomever I know. I always tell the person that inquired, hey, you want me to find you someone? And I'll DM like 10 people and be like, hey dude, I got this gig, you want it, it's all yours. But those are the things that kind of make it harder for me, which I started a spreadsheet actually of like contractors.
Yeah. So I would actually recommend, shameless plug, this is not an ad. So wherever you put this, it's not an ad. Notion is a system we've been using to really just create a database for contractors.
Dude, Notion has so many windows though, man. I've tried it. I mean,
yeah,
I was just kind of lazy, but
no, I feel you. I mean, spreadsheets work too, using Google Suite, but yeah, it's definitely creatives out there. Keep a list of some sort of the people, and also, ask yourself, is the work these folks producing the type of work you also want to be involved with? And also, like, if they have skills and you're like, oh, I've never seen you do this type of work before, but I believe in you, give them a chance. I think in this industry also, it's the scarcity mindset of everyone is my competition. And sure, technically, yes.
Yeah. The thing with this industry, right? It's like, what I'll say, we had one client and then I took it or something, or I started working, which those are like kind of like the weird situations. This just happened to me like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. A friend of mine, DP, brought me on a production as a cam op, and I helped him digitech one day, and we were doing a ton of stuff. Anyways, he brought me on board. This was through an agency that hired him. He brought me and another fella, right? And now, I've been with him on 2 of these shoots before now. The agency hit me up to cam op. Well, they call it AC, right? So I was like, all right. I read the email, and in my head, I'm like, I feel like I'm cheating on my buddy, And because I know some people look at it that way. And that's the problem, right? Because it's like, I don't want him to think I'm taking his client, because, I mean, he's a great dude, super good dude. I hope I get this full on this podcast, but super great, talented guy, great personality, really fun to be around. And, always helps me out with work too, man, which is like super appreciative. And I don't want to break that, that connection too. So I hit him up actually. I guess this would be something I should mention, but I hit him up thinking like, what, this is like the respectful thing to do. Like, hey man, look, your client hit me up, they want me to AC, and he's at, great, I thought they would ask you to DP. I give them your number, figured, this would be this would be good for you. And he's like, don't sweat it, man. This is how the industry is.
Yep.
I just hope, when you get a bigger gig, you throw me something, that's just how it works. And 100%, like I am 100% grateful for the people that have brought me on board. Like Chris has hired me a couple of times on his agency, helped him gaff a couple of times. And then with him, right, he's renting my camera and all that stuff, my other buddy. And those things, like, they don't go unnoticed, Like, I can't wait. I'm actually in the talks of a potential project that is like good budget. And I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to bring on everyone that's hired me and try to pay them a solid, like, what's your day rate? Cool. Yeah. Hold this day for me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. That's, hit me up, dude.
Dude, for sure.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing though, is like communicating with the people, doing what you did of just like, hey man, I don't want you to feel that way. Like, this is what happened. Those are good things to do, because people also remember, like, oh, like, Jesus, like, respected me enough to let me know. And obviously he's like, don't sweat it. Like, I actually referred you. But you never know. Yeah, dude. It ultimately, as, I think right now it's tough. We're recording this podcast on the 1st of September, and in the industry we're in, you still have, 2 major groups that, though you and I are working on AMPTP sets, are still on strike. And, like, people are needing work.
Yeah.
But there's a way to go about it to where everyone feels supported. And, I feel like right now I am noticing a shift in the industry of the more I talk to people in different roles, they just want to be on set with good people.
Yeah.
Doing work they're happy with.
I think, like, I rarely get work in, like, LA or other crews, because, like, like we said, most of the work that you get typically is your network, especially if you're, like, cam opping or, DP stuff. Maybe someone might pick you up, but let's say like cam op gaff, you're typically hired by a friend, someone that knows you, I'd say. And all the sets I'm in, everyone's chill, unless it's someone from like a different crew.
Yeah.
And it's like weird, but it's like these circle. Like every time I get on a bigger commercial set that's not through the agency where I used to work, everyone's like, who do you work with? And I'm like, oh, I've worked with him. And they're like, oh, I don't know. Oh yeah, I know that guy. And it's like, okay, cool. It's kind of like a validation in a sense while you're on set, because it's like everyone's kind of like low-key testing you, kind of see where you're at. And this is like every time you work with new people, I feel like. I think we should get into some stuff like, what would you recommend someone that's like, barely getting started, has a camera, and wants to do this professionally? What would you tell them? Like, dude, there's no blueprint for this, 100%.
Right.
Well, how would you go about now?
So I would do a couple things. Expertise, like you said earlier, is only built by repetition. So I would be getting out there, and it's also asking yourself what type of creative work you want to do. If it's commercial work, what type of commercial work? If it's documentary work, what type of documentary work? If it's street photography, or if it's wedding photography, like all these things, you ask yourself, what is my end goal? And something that I've been learning recently is the systems you set are more important than the goals you have. So you're asking yourself, if I want to be a commercial DP, what are the things I would do? Obviously, there is no blueprint, so everyone's journey is different. But I would be, if you're wanting to be a shooter, shoot as much as you can. Have a camera with you at all times, because those fundamentals never go away. It doesn't matter what type of creative work you do. If you can shoot, you can shoot. And so I would also be, outside of shooting all the time, it's like we were talking about earlier, it's working with other people in the industry. If it's shadowing them on a set, if it's PAing, doing that, or if you want to do weddings, it's second shooting for somebody else. Maybe they're like, you've been here for a long time, so I'll give you $200. You go away, you don't have to edit it, but you can take the images home and really study. The other thing I would do, a little controversy on today's world, but I would limit how much you're looking at social media.
Yeah.
I know in my own career, it's been a cancer. I'm thankful for all the opportunities and people that have been put in my life because of it. But ultimately, who I am as a creative hasn't grown because of it. It has created the comparison trap, the analysis paralysis, and all the things. I think there's a way to use social media effectively to network and communicate and share. But if you're looking at that as a source of inspiration, I'd urge anybody to, if you can't afford photo books, find them in a library, find them online, pirate them. I don't care. But start looking at the people, the greats, and really sit there and look at their photos and think through what makes this a celebrated photo or to most people a good photo. Why does it resonate with me? And ask yourself that. And then from there, take that and try and practice with it. If it's maybe Saul Leiter, the way he does his layers, I'm going to try that in street photography. Or if it's, I want to take what he does with abstraction and put it in a portrait session, and you do that. And then also, I remember my old national career director at Outfront, something he told me is learn to find inspiration outside of the medium that you work in. So if you're a photographer and videographer, go pay attention to authors, to painters, to musicians. Be this eclectic person that's getting inspiration from so many different sources and curate your inspiration. And through that, as well as shooting as often as you can, you start to find your voice. You start to realize what makes you, you. Ultimately, every photo that exists has been taken. That doesn't matter. You get to put your own spin on it.
Yeah.
You get to make it uniquely something that's the parts of you. The other thing I would say is early on, say yes to as many things as possible. Expose yourself to a lot of different shooting situations, because if you don't go into it and you don't quite know the thing that you want to do, doing that and experiencing a bunch of different things will help you direct your path. So for me, I've done weddings. I've done bat mitzvahs. I've done so many events. And I've also done commercial work. And I think the volume of event-based stuff I've done, I've realized I don't want to do events in my career as much as possible. And getting to work more on music videos and commercial sets, I realized that's what made me happy with my career. And so I, did the whole getting to know people, blah, 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 like we talked about earlier. So yeah, there's just some of the main things I would say to anybody as they're starting out. And also, be patient.
Yeah, dude.
If you think you've hit your stride, you haven't. Yeah. There also is no destination. Talk to somebody in their 70s or 80s who's been doing photography for a long time. Dude, they're not going to say, oh yeah, I was so super successful and I made it. And, now I don't even think about photography. It's part of you. It's part of, if you've seen the movie Soul, it's part of your spark. It's what makes you come alive. And that's something that's never going to go away. So instead of also reframing it as fame, success, wealth, fortune, am I going to be doing the things that I want to be doing that makes me happy, feel fulfilled, and connect me with other people? If you can't achieve those, then you're kind of misaligned with what your purpose is. So
yeah, I mean, dude, that's some really deep stuff right there, but 100%, man. I've done events, I've done all that stuff, and it's not always super fun. At least compared to something where you're DPing or you're taking charge in the creative. Those are the super fun ones when you got time to light a set or translate the camera language. Those are the fun stuff. And what we do when we used to shoot, Chris and I used to actually do a lot of street photography. That's how we would hang out, basically.
Some travel photography too,
dude. Oh yeah, out to the desert.
Done a couple desert trips. We're overdue for one where we plan a sunset better too.
Where we actually planned the trip, because we always just go last minute and we're like, all right, cool. It's super fun though. But out of those times, when I would do those street photos, sometimes even when I'd go by myself, just put on a podcast or music, and dude, you just get in the zone. Like just like that movie when the guy gets in the zone playing the piano, I would get in the zone taking photos, and I feel like that's when my best work would come out, because I'm like so attentive to my environment and what I'm looking for and what I'm creating. It's just weird, and I've noticed I get in that flow when I'm gaffing or I'm DPing in a creative field, like in a creative shoot where I have more control. Like it's just you're there, like your mindset is focused on this. And I think about this because when I used to draw a lot. It was like graffiti, whatever. But when I would do my black books, I would zone out like that. And I feel like that is exactly like that movie. It's like when you are in the arts for the creative side, that is what you get. I mean, of course, the downside of this is the funny side of our work, I think, or not me personally. But like when you do this for a living, you do some shoots where you do for the money, and then you do some shoots that you do for the art. And you got to keep doing the ones for the art, or else you're just going to be burnt out.
Yeah.
Like when I left the agency now, all I do is if I have free time, I try to find something I can make, something that I will enjoy, something that will push my career, something that will get me to the next level, because this it literally feels like levels now. Like what you were saying with like you get to these steps and you feel like you made it. And I remember the biggest one for me was once I replaced my income from the agency, I made it, and I replaced that a couple months ago, and I was like, wow,
now what?
What's next? This isn't enough. And now I'm like hitting, my best months, and I'm like, dude, how do I double these months? And it's weird because, and for me, it's more like I want to live comfortable with my family. My wife doesn't work, my kids and everything. So I have that on one end, and then on the other end is I want to hit those big sets, but I'm not like I would love to do more bigger music, more creative stuff. But I don't know. I feel like once you get to some of that stuff, it's not what you expect.
Yeah, once you start leveling up in your career, the stars kind of fall out of your eyes and you see things for what they really are. And like you said, like sometimes you even weigh the pros and cons. Maybe there's a cap at the level of commercials you want to work at.
Yeah.
Because like you're creatively satisfied, you're making good money and you're happy. And the next stuff is just not worth it.
I can say that I've worked on some sets that, I mean, I didn't think they were super cool, right? Like at least, and I'll just say what it was. It was like some hospital products, right?
Right.
I'm sure. I love the people that I work with. Love that. Love working on those. But they're not super creative, right? Because the biggest thing behind those is the ones I've worked on, I'm typically like second camera, right? Which, cool, whatever, it's chill. But then there's my DP, and then we have an art director, and then we have our agency director, and then we have a client that's on set, and then we have a client that's on another, like the other side of the country. But the biggest thing here is we take about 30 minutes per shot. And I'm literally just there to camera, which is easy, right? I don't got to edit anything, whatever. I could take more of these gigs. I don't care. But these are those gigs that don't fulfill you as an artist, right? These are literally just the camera. You're just, even the DP will say, hey, we should do it like this. But if the art director says, no, well, let's do it like this, who cares what the DP said? The art director is above DP in these sets, right? And then the agency director changes his mind, and then the other. So it's like a hierarchy that you have to follow. So by the end of the day, the DP got to say in like one or two shots in the whole day. And that's the things where I'm like, I wouldn't want to be in a set like that if that's what the bigger, productions call for. And I know some of them do when there's some art directors and stuff involved.
Well, earlier in your career, you can't be like, this is the creative vision we're going with. If you don't like it, tough. Like, none of us are at that level right now. There's some people that can go in and say, we're doing things my way.
Yeah.
But, it goes back to, you communicate with people in pre-production, so there's no surprises.
Yeah, 100%.
And being malleable to change. But it's the old also rule, one for them, one for me. It's do the gig the way somebody wants for them. And maybe if you've shot coverage and you have everything, you can go piece together a director's cut the way you saw it. I'm sitting on multiple projects where, I haven't had time, frankly, because work's been really busy. But, I've been like, the way the end product was versus what we had as our vision ultimately isn't what I was hoping for. So I need to make some directors and DP cuts to some commercials that I've shot.
I totally feel that.
And even, I can even say that in the agency world. There's clients that get assigned to us where we're like, yeah, we're not excited about doing the creative for this one, frankly.
Yeah.
But it keeps the lights on. There's other projects to be had to keep you creative. But yeah, what's the next topic you want to ask?
No, I was gonna say like I have a couple of projects where I'm at on that, like where I but the way I see it is I make my first cut and this is my interpretation of this, and then the client chooses what they want, and at the end of the day, right, I'll do any changes that the client wants.
Yep.
I'm making a video for you the way you view your company, and by all means tell me what you want. This is what I'm here for, right?
Yeah.
That's what becomes at the end. It's a service business, what we do. I do want to mention when we used to go do street photography, I have everything to thank Chris for being able to make it as a creative, as a full-time, because Chris was there. We were talking about this earlier before the podcast, but Chris used to, when he came down to San Diego and we would start shooting, he would tell me what life was working at an agency full-time as a creative. And I was like, dude, I was dealing blackjack on the nights, and he'd hit me up like, let's go shoot in the morning sometimes or whatever. And I was like, hadn't slept. I'm like, fuck it, let's go shoot. But it was so like reviving. Like there's these people that you're going to meet in your career that will just help you. Like even just him sharing with me his experience and, telling me like, dude, just keep doing it, work on this, work on that. Like that helped me out so much. And that's where I just wanted to say, like, just reach out to all the people you can, connect with people that are especially at your level. Find the people that are really working hard. And if you're shooting once a week, you're not working hard enough. Trust me, like you have to, even now that I work full-time as a freelancer, I think I'm shooting way more than before I wanted to do this full-time.
Mm-hmm.
And because I know I need to grow, I need to post more and do all that stuff. But I don't want to take more of your time, Chris.
Nah.
I do appreciate having you here. Thank you for being the first person on this. And
Dude.
yeah,
Thanks for having me.
you're welcome. We'll see if we make more of these. If you guys want to hear more stuff like this, let me know down in the comments. Likes. I think this will probably go on YouTube. That's probably easier, and some cuts for social media maybe.
Some TikTok.
Some TikTok. I'm pretty big on my lives now, apparently. But hey, thank you for watching, guys. See you guys.
Peace.